Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. This is Grand Arena, the first match of the final week, season 43. And we begin this week in Kyber 2. We are kind of close to the edge with about 16 skill rating above the line. We're going to do a quick recap of how last week's defense performed. It wasn't a great week for me. We went 1-2, but my defense did do a lot, and there was one match where if I would have cleared the fleet, I would have won, where we could have gone 2-1 for the week. But the first match, my opponent attempted Starkiller up against Dash-Han, so I'm happy to win that one. Most of this is straightforward. He then tries Bad Batch Grievous, gets a hold. His Executor fails up against the Profundity, and then Negotiator failing up against the Malevolence failing up against the Negotiator, which is actually why I don't do this counter all that often anymore, because it's happened for me too as people have stronger relics on their Kenobis. I've just switched to the Chimera, because that's consistent and there's no RNG component, where the Malevolence has a little bit of RNG. With the second match, Wampa fails to Grievous. This is why I say you can't have a Relic 5 Wampa. Relic 5 Wampa can lose. Now this is probably partly Datacrons, but you eliminate the RNG by having a Relic 7 Wampa. Plus there's other counters that are opened up by having a higher Relic Wampa. Don't stop at 5. He had a pretty good run squad. He tried to clean up with a solo JKL, so I pick up another hold there, and he full clear? No, this guy full cleared, but a low banner count. And then my final, no, he didn't full clear. Whatever, it doesn't matter, I lost. And then the final round, Spanky here. This is actually Cheezer on Twitch. You can check out that video, or you can check out his channel. He had a good run, but we did pick up a couple holds. CLS stopping Dash-Han, and then he tried Nihilist Savage up against this Malkron. I'm pretty surprised at this one, because that is not a bad team. And for him to quit there, it must have just become such a nuisance that it wasn't working. He must have lost his Nihilist, because he's got like a Gear 12 Nihilist there. JKR here up against Maul. I'm pretty happy about that one too. That one seems like it should be a team that could handle that counter. And then the rest goes pretty smooth. He has the better Leviathan, and okay. With this week's bracket, this is a weird one. We are near the edge of Kyber 2, Kyber 3, but what we have here with GLs is there are 5 players here with 4 GLs. So this is kind of why I didn't want to get another GL, because I liked being in that lowest GL position, challenging myself, punching up. Now we're there's not a ton of players who have 4 GLs. It's possible to climb up into the lower end of Kyber 2, but there's less. It's not as unique. It's not as special as doing it with 3 GLs or 2 GLs or 1 GLs like we've done throughout this format. Now with GP, everyone's fairly similar. Zetas, there's a couple people low. Really, I'm just looking if people are above 200, because at that point you have most of the Zetas that matter. With Omicrons, my opponent actually has more than me. That's pretty atypical. Usually I've got either the most or tied for the most. This bracket though does have a number of people with really low Amis. Like in Grand Arena, if you take Omicron seriously, you should probably be like 15, at least in my level of Kyber 2. If you're in lower divisions, that's fine. But in Kyber 2, I would say 15 minimum, and we got a guy with 13, 10, 11, 10, like really low count. Relic wise, there's some weird things here. It's not a very strong bracket in terms of relic count. There are some players with really low relic numbers. We got 114 here. Like usually I'm the lowest on relic, and that's not the case. There are 2 people lower than me at 114, 115. My opponent's not too much more than me, and yeah, so that should be fine. What really does matter is the Gear 11 plus depth. My opponent's really shallow at 179. Like I think I gotta look for 200 as the threshold here. What it's really communicating is, one, you look at the difference between the number of relic units and the number of Gear 11 plus, because if those numbers are very similar, that means most of the roster is in those relics, and depending on the number of GLs, it means most of those relics and Gear 11 plus are related to the GL prerequisites. Now as the game goes on, that's not as big of a deal, but in terms of like the Ray or SOKR GLs or some of the older GLs, it means like there's a lot of fluff in there that doesn't really really contribute as much. Now, that's getting addressed as the game matures, so it's less and less the case, but it's still directionally informative. And then the other aspect here is if my defense gets holds, my opponent's going to run out of team. Like 179 is low. There's a guy here with 142. Like that is crazy shallow at this stage of the game, at this point in Kyber 2, where there's one hold, you probably don't have enough teams to counter anymore. You probably have to go full defense in order to have a shot. With the relic distribution with my opponent, there's one player with 7 GLs in this bracket, and he's got solid relics. Everyone else, like the differences between me and my opponent are negligible. Mod-wise, and this is interesting, and kind of what I would expect with so many players in this bracket with 4 GLs, is really good mods. Like the averages here are all really close to each other. I don't really have the advantage that I usually do. I'm better than a couple players, but there's what, 1, 2, 3 players with a better top 25 average, and with the top 500, there's one player better than me. But everyone's pretty close. With the 25 plus counts, this is another one where it gets pretty impressive. Like my opponent's got 36. Another guy on screen here's got 48. There's a couple guys off screen with 53 and 40. Like those are really nice counts. It's something that I'll be beefing up soon if I ever make that long promised video. The 20 plus speed, 15 plus speed, you can see my opponent and I are pretty close. Datacrons, this is where I get another bit of advantage. I got some really big numbers here. I'd say there's 3 players participating with Datacrons at my level. Nobody's kind of checking out though, because even my opponent, who has really low count, he's got a good amount of level 9s. No Jabba, 2 players in the bracket without Jabba. There are 4 without Lord Vader, 1 without JMK, who is my opponent, 1 player without JML. Only a single Rey in this bracket. I've never seen that before. And then 3 of us without SLKR. In the Ami portion, he's got a Relic 7 3 Ami Malgus, solid Raddus. His Iden's good, so he's got a Chimera counter. Starkiller here, triple Ami looks good. Some of these 2 and 3 Ami characters, I would try not to put all your Amis there and spread them out a little bit more, because they'll have a bigger impact. Dash, no Ami. Wampa is good. He's got a Relic 7 Wampa. There's 3 of us with Relic 7 Wampas. The rest are 5 or lower. Savage Ami. There are 3 players without the Savage Ami. Traya's, everybody got the Traya Ami. This is the most Aphras I think I've seen in a bracket. There are 3 players without Aphra, and this is kind of incredible. My opponent does not have Qui-Gon or the Qui-Gon Ami. Even if you didn't have relics on your Qui-Gon, I would put that one on. It's a good squad, and it doesn't matter if he died. You want Anakin, and you basically just want to just like supercharge Anakin. Swolo here, there are 3 players not using him at all, maybe 4. I've got the only usable Zori. There are 2 players with Reva, and that includes my opponent. And there's 3, maybe 3.5 usable Rexes, maybe 4, but 3 players with the Ami. With the rest of this, looks good. My opponent has 5-star Leviathan, 5-star Profundity, and we are going to be recording over footage. So let's take a look at the quality of his modding. So organize this by speed, and my opponent here, he's got about 29 characters. Jin Urso is his last character above 300 speed. So you can see like Chupio, JKR, all a little slow. Starkiller CLS, pretty slow. Looking at the defense, he has struck first, did not full clear. 2 shots onto Qui-Gon. You can see I do have a cam at relics now. 2 shots on CLS. And I did bring cam to relic so I could use a Qui-Gon Datacron, then forgot to put it on. But beyond that, I also forgot to take Qui-Gon to relic 5, so I can't even use it. All that work to get cam ready. 2 shots onto Finn, and then up against fleets here. Couldn't clear fleets. I think that comes down to distribution. And actually, I know what happened because we're talking over footage. I've played this. What really happened is he didn't update his fleet defense, and his Sith ships couldn't be used with his Leviathan. So all the work of getting the Leviathan, not being able to use it, at least in an optimal squad. So you saw like Raddus was in there. That's where his 3rd sister is. Down below, we've got Aphra, Hux, Malgus, Trench, and Starkiller. So really good teams at the high end, but there's some manageable things here. So with Aphra here, we're going to start with first, let me shift to the large screen, and with Starkiller, just going to put on a decent this is what I like the Retribution Datacron, because if the opponent attacks, you can get like an extra assist out of Starkiller and get towards Unleashed a little bit faster. But this is a pretty strong counter, and because this opponent doesn't have Rey Swolo, I know I don't need to use my Starkiller elsewhere. And once you eliminate Aphra, this team falls apart. So I may have been able to like stun someone else instead of having Torture land on Starkiller, but I decided I'd rather control Aphra. We got Malgus here. With Malgus, we are going to do gas. That is partly for a couple reasons. One, it's a weak Malgus. There's no Revan. There's no Bastila Fallen. And those are way easier to take out. Like, I kind of think you have to use Revan and Fallen with Malgus in order for it to be an effective team. Because the ones I lose to are like that. If there was like a Leviathan level Revan on the field here, I would not have used gas, because it would have lost, and it may have lost in such a way where I would have been forced, where I couldn't have used like my cheaper cleanups. So we go through here. Kind of easy stuff. Like, because this was an easy Malgus, I decided I was going to save my Sith Eternal Emperor and not use him here. And that's what you're inviting your opponent to do if you do things like that. Like, let Sith Eternal Emperor be a dedicated countered Malgus. Or if your opponent has Jedi Knight Cal Kestis be the counter there. Because what that allows me to do is use Sith Eternal Emperor up against another team that has a fewer amount of counters, which is Starkiller. And now I'm able to bring a very strong and safe counter up against this team. I do wonder if I should link like Mara Jade and Starkiller instead. It doesn't really matter. It might affect the difference of banners, because like we do lose a guy. Not that it matters too much. I think new for this week. It may have been new last week, but I have been able to bring my Sith Eternal Emperor up to higher relics now. We did that in the last roster video that's up already. But I couldn't afford to bring him up above Relic 1 prior to the start of this season of Grand Arena, because I had to save all my signal data for the Leviathan. Now that we're comfortably past the Leviathan, I could finally add some relic levels so I could use data crowns with C. Wampa, pay attention to this. This is important. I've got Relic 7, Ami Wampa. I'm going up against a team in Trench, Wat, and Dooku that this team gets holds for me up against Wampa, but I wanted to see it in action. So look at how scary this looks for a while. Because I know that this is a pretty effective team on defense. It gets me holds. And I'm pretty sure, like, look at where my Wampa looks. Now, I'm pretty sure it's because my opponents fairly regularly only have like a Relic 5 Wampa. And I think if I didn't have a Relic 7 Wampa, I would have lost this. But because I have those higher relics, I was able to win. And I brought this up on a Twitch stream where we're talking about like Scout Trooper with Iden to Scout Trooper stop Wampa, stop that counter. And it might, but it might be one of those things where it stops a weak Wampa and not a strong Wampa. Because what this is really about is you need to stop Wampa before he ramps up, which you can do when he's a little weaker. But my Wampa's going to get stronger and stronger to the point where it's perfectly safe. The only chance they had was in the opening, which was legitimate. Like I thought I had messed up for a moment and used a team that I knew to be risky. But it's also why, like, I don't disrespect Trench. Like, Trench is solid enough. Like, he's not he's not like Sign of Jango, where until the Omicron on Chieftain there wasn't really a use. Like, Trench is usable. There's just more counters and stuff. He's also solid on offense if you were to use him there. But pretty interesting, and I think for me that just makes the case of why your Wampa deserves higher relics. Plus, you need a Relic 7 Wampa if you ever want to do like a Sith Eternal Emperor counter. Minimum. Now, Hux here. This is actually a mistake. Obviously, this is a strong counter and it's going to work. But it messed up something I wanted to try later in the video, and we'll bring that up later. But I needed to save my Malak. Because I took Sith Empire Trooper off of defense because he used to be paired with my Malgus, so that I had 2 tanks, so I could place one with Sith Eternal Emperor and keep the other for another team, and that other team will address when we get there. This is an easy solo, but in the moment I was just thinking, okay, let's do this. Let's take an easy squad, or a strong counter, get some banners, take out a squad, and I wasn't thinking. When this, I probably could have done maybe some testing. Maybe we could have done a little Rex testing. Maybe we do a little Scout Trooper testing. Do something. We will do Scout Trooper later in the video, but there were other things I could have been. Right there is notable. I did not use Drain Life on crew at that moment because it doesn't do anything. That's why I used the second special or basic, and now no more Drain Lives because crew's resistant to it. That's the only nuance. And whenever you land that healing immunity, it makes it way easier. So clear that front territory, no problem. Having a pretty good run. Check out that back wall. We got a JTR. We've got a Merrin, a Relic Merrin. It's a JTR Swolo, and we've got Iden, and that last team is a Bossk Zam. And then up top, now that we know what's back there, we can be comfortable using some GLs, but we're going to start with Third Sister here, and we are going to use Traya. And what's really nice is just Traya Savage, especially because I don't got relics on my Triumvirate. So that's a Gear 12 Traya, Gear 12 Nihilus, and this is a very comfortable counter. We've used this a number of times. It's one of those things where I originally was feeling a little like time crunch that like we got to get Relic Traya to survive up against these third sisters. But we've been figuring out things as a community where we can handle Third Sister with different versions. Really, it just comes down to Savage, or in some cases, Sith Eternal Emperor. Because a Sith Eternal Emperor with Traya, Ami, and Savage will also just going to crush it in 5v5. Pay attention to that Tusken team, because that's the team I want to talk about that I alluded about with Malak. Because there's a specific thing I wanted to try. Now, up against Raddus, we're probably going to Aphra, because we don't really need to use Aphra elsewhere, and this is a very strong counter. Just the thing with Raddus is there's a smaller pool of teams that work. A lot of players would do the Jedi Knight Revan thing. I don't trust mine to do it. I think it might be a mod thing or something, but whenever I've attempted it, it's gone poorly. I've also didn't have a Relic Bastila, but now because of Leviathan I do, so maybe it's something I should go back to trying. But this works out fine. Yeah, like in the old version with Jedi Knight Revan, like the Jedi Knight Revan counter is JKR, Yoda, Bastila. And I had a Gear 11 Bastila, and just my Bastila dies, so it's not effective. Jolie does not work, because if you're using Jolie, it means you're removing either Fallen or Yoda. And if you remove Fallen, Yoda doesn't get offense up, so he's not doing enough. Here's what I want to talk about. Okay, so in that Sidious slot, I wanted to use Malak, because I wanted a tank, and I wanted Fear to stop the Tuskens, to protect them. Because this team I'm using, it works up against weaker Tuskens. I've used this a lot. If you go back to my other videos, you'll see me using this. But up against high relic Tuskens, where this is a relic 7 Tusken squad. This is Crate Dragon Tusken squad. I think I may have faced, like, maybe not a complete relic 7 version, but like a high relic version, where I know that they're just going to rip through my Vader and Talon. So I wanted a tank. I wanted Malak to land fear so that I had more time. Because all that happens here is the dots that don't expire are going to take out Chieftain and Warrior. And then what happens with Talon is she starts ramping up Loyal Hand, where she can take out the Raiders with an AoE. And it's a fairly cheap way to deal with things. But because I made that mistake, I just decided we're going to JML it. We don't need to use my GLs elsewhere, so we do the safe thing and just take care of this. But the testing, I wish I would have been able to properly test, because I was very curious if Malak would have been enough of a difference for Vader to work. Maybe later in the week we'll get a chance, but I doubt it. So taking a look here, JML, this is strong counter. I'm just calling in assists. I'm stunning and controlling a little bit, but I want to spread around the inherited teachings so that we can get to the ultimate. And what you'll see in this is I don't do it fast enough. I should have done it faster, but I was getting distracted by all the other abilities, because there's all these fun abilities here. Because like I get tempted to want to use the E-Flex, where without the ultimate, there's just not as much damage. But you get tempted, because you can see the charge is at 64%. Like right there, I should have just kept charging it. But with the characters weak, I thought I'd have an opportunity here to use an AoE, like right now. But it's not strong enough yet. So right around here is where I realized, oh, I got to charge it my ultimate. I was wasting time not doing it. So now we're just focused on charging. Now we got it. And I want to prime things a little bit. Yeah, there's no protection, so I thought, okay, maybe we got a shot now. And now we go again, and we land it. Now we'll move to the lower territory, because we're through the problematic teams. Those other teams have options. Now we're looking at Merrin, Iden, and that JTR Swolo team. But we'll start with Merrin. And we're going to go with JKR, because we can ignore the taunt. We can mark whoever we want and focus. And we got the Basilicron, which is going to make all this pretty strong. We go after Talzin first, because Talzin's at gear 11, which means we can trigger the sacrifices on zombie really quick. Now they're triggered. Now we're focusing on Merrin. She's eliminated. So this makes it, this was just kind of a dominant counter. Merrin's still a very good squad. I've been using Merrin a lot. I might even use Merrin later this match. And you can see the difference just when Merrin is in the right context is really powerful. So troopers, this is just a thing where if you got the speed advantage, I don't even really check. I just assumed I did based on their other modding and other things going on. But you can see we start off first. Go after Cara Dune because she's weak and I want to get the turn meter train going early. And there we go. I would like to get my Dark Trooper a little higher in relics, so like that would be even easier. Yeah, so if I would have still had my Savage, I would have tried Savage here, but we just go Raddus. Because as soon as Raddus gets to the download, it's over. This match we played pretty fast. Like this went as perfectly as it can go when you also include a little bit of testing. Yeah, I don't even know if we have much to say here. We talk about Ahsoka a little bit. Just talking about episode 3 and stuff. Like, what I want to emphasize is I don't have an issue with the story. Like, I think there's a good show within it. I would not be surprised that by the end of 8 episodes, someone could come along, and it's probably a fun exercise, is just edit this show down to 2 hours. Because my problem with episode 3 is that episode could have been 5 minutes. It's not that nothing happened, it's that so little happened, and that the things that did happen were either redundant or could have been far shorter. And I made a whole like thing on the Discord about this, so we'll get into it, but I want to see what this next match is, see if it's something we need to talk about or not. And if not, we'll just get into nonsense. Okay, Grievous, I don't even remember what I did with Grievous. Did I shock it? Oh no, this is where I did Night Sisters Merrin. So yeah, we do need to talk about this. Because Shakti, there's some RNG to it. Sometimes you gotta clean it up. So I don't like to use it too often. I'll do it if I feel forced. Now we go here. And it doesn't matter what level your Merrin is at, that Omicron is worth putting on. I wish I would have put it on sooner. And especially just for the community so you guys could see what I'm talking about. Because I only have like a week's footage of the Merrin Ami before I took her to Gear 12. I waited too long. And I was always going to put it on. I should have just put it on early. Like we went like month and a half, 2 months? 2 months of not showcasing what that Ami could do, and we really should have. You just see it was devastating. It's because of the plague mechanics. It all becomes about the plague mechanics. That's why I've been saying like Asajj is less important with the squad, because it's not, the revive mechanic is not what's critical anymore. But you see, in the right context, Merrin crushed. Also, I didn't have zombie. I think having DACA for that revive is important. JTR Swolo here. You guys know how much I love this thing. I need to make a video on it. I'll probably do it this weekend because it's time. But don't fall into the trap of all this stuff of people saying Swolo's useless without Rey. Not true. Not true at all. Or the groupthink of that the Ignore Protection Omicron is the worst one. I just completely disagree. It is an excellent Omicron because that's what made that possible. The Ignore Protection is what introduces the one-shot capabilities of Swolo, which you see happen twice in this match. 3 times in this match, Ignoring Protection turns Swolo into a one-shot machine. He's great. Now, we do have the issue of R2 moving over to Leia. He's not required, but he does help because he gives some stats, but he also protects Swolo. Alright, now we're doing Scout Trooper testing, so we gotta talk about this. Now, obviously, Gear 12 Swolo, Gear 12 BB-8. No Amis on the Swolo. So this was a little risky, but the reason I did it was because there's nowhere else to do any testing. This was the best remaining team for testing. I still don't feel like I've got a good feel for Scout Trooper, partly because we never did a kit reveal video, so I didn't study it like I usually do a kit. Like, look at that Drogon video I just put out. Like, I went pretty deep with Drogon. I feel like we figured out some things. I did not do that with Scout Trooper. I don't know it to the same level. I need to just do it for myself. But we're going after BB-8. I think I was being a little indecisive. One of the differences this week is I do have Gear 12 on Moff Gideon and Death Trooper, because last week's testing, I just felt like they weren't powerful enough to take anybody out. And so now See, we take out BB-8, eliminate the Illuminated Destiny issue. Now we got Swolo. But what you see me doing is trying to be careful with Armor Shred, because I want to land Armor Shred onto JTR because she's relics. And we got to take them both out at the same time. Well, technically, Death Mark we could land, but I'm about to lose my Death Trooper. This is a squad I think is going to be much better in 5v5. But you see here, a lot of things happening, but we lose Death Trooper. He lasted longer than I thought with how some of the stuff was going. Pull away some of that turn meter. Now GATR's down to the yellow. Clear the Foresight, do some hits. Land another Armor Shred. She's in the red. Now we need to get Swolo into the same situation. Both in the red. AoE. Take him down. And now here we are. We just got to deal with that Foresight. But there we go. I was pretty shocked that we won it. That was solid. Now, if there were relics on those characters, we would have lost. If there were Amis, we would have lost. But still, you can't be upset about that. That's pretty happy. We're going to talk here because this I just decided to overpower this one. I was like, I'm done with this. Let's get to fleets. So let's talk about Ahsoka. So the points I was making on Discord and just kind of like the larger problem of writing going on. Because, like, I don't care about nitpick stuff. Like, make whatever choices you want in a show, like writers. But if you're whatever choice you make, you need to sell. And my argument is always more focused on: did you do the work to sell the story that you want to make, or are you following enough basic principles of writing to make it a compelling story? And this episode doesn't pass those marks for me. Where, God, we're going through this fast. Okay, we got through a preamble at least, because I can be a talker sometimes. Let's talk about fleet a little. We'll have opportunity in fleet to finish at least a portion of this point. If you want to see the full point, head over to the Discord. I broke it down like scene by scene how the episode was working. Okay, we're going to Scythe it up. I still haven't taken the mods off Gauntlet, and I need to. Probably should have held back with the TIE Reaper. I think next time I would. It's just like I wanted another ship in a slot, but it kind of deprives my Chimera, and it's not something that matters. Failed land the buff immunity. They get some good RNG on the assists. Not doing much damage yet. You can see they're not taking out my Gauntlet. They didn't take out a TIE Fighter yet. Using a basic because I don't want to make any of these ships more resilient. Take out a TIE Fighter. Take out everything else. Now we bring out the Bomber. A little bit behind where I'd like to be, but in a solid enough spot. Now I'm thinking, deliberating. We do a basic, we get that offense up. Spread that burning again. Real close to taking out that Y-Wing, but we've taken so long. Like, it's just things took way too long. And I'm just hoping we take out this Y-Wing. It's all I want. It's all I need. But too much recovery and that window's gone. Yeah, and we don't even do that. It doesn't matter. So at that point, I'm like, all right, we got to Profundity it. But it never hurts to take a gamble on something when you have the Profundity coming up. We don't need to talk about the Profundity. Oh, no, there is something I want to talk about with the Profundity. Because I don't watch enough other players to know if, especially with a counter like this, if they all do it the same way, and it just took me a long time to notice. But I think what most players start off doing is they go they want all the assist abilities early to charge up to get to the ultimate quickly. I started doing this where I put the whole reinforced hull or whatever, putting that on, because that then allows you to survive the attacks while you can then go after the Y-wing, and it makes your Y-wing not go down while being able to take out your opponents. Making that a little adjustment there has made all the difference and allows my Profundity to probably get closer to like a 95% win rate. Now, we could have started off like this, but then what this forces me into is having to take more chances with the Executor, which, had the Scythe worked, then we could have used a cheaper counter, or we could have used the Profundity up against the Executor and just dominated it and not have to worry about anything, leaving me with plenty of options to clean up the final fleet. But we don't need to talk about any of that because we've hit the main points. Let's talk about Ahsoka. So you have that opening scene. I've heard some people say they don't like the training scene. I like the training scene. There's no issue with it for me. It's effective character building. The problem with it is the main point of that scene, that Sabine has a low midichlorian count and can't wield the Force effectively, is that they already brought that up in the last episode. Like this not even the last episode. I think it even alluded to it in the first episode that she was a weak Jedi candidate, or weak candidate with the Force to go through the training. And so the audience already has this information. So the scene is failing to convey new information. And one of the big rules of writing, or especially screenwriting, is show, don't tell. And why I like the training scene is it's a scene where you are showing that Sabine's midichlorians are not sufficient enough to control the Force. Whereas the previous episode, it failed that. It told us, you had Hu Yang saying to Ahsoka and whoever else that Sabine was weak and one of the worst candidates for the training that he's ever seen. Which, that is a scene that fails. What you could have done, and why I think you can edit this show down into a more effective show, is you instead cut out the scene from scene 2 and just have this scene. Just have the scene from scene 3 with the training. And because there's even a line in there that says, where Ahsoka says to Hu Yang, you told her? That's all you need. You don't need the scene where they had that conversation. You can allude to it through that line of dialogue. That would have been fine. And it's just, it starts conveying this issue, this larger issue of the writing on the show, because the dialogue is terrible. The dialogue, and I don't get it, because like Filoni's written some great dialogue. Like Clone Wars is fantastic. You know what's really fantastic? Tales of the Jedi. Tales of the Jedi is so smartly written. It's so subtle. Like, I don't want to spoil Tales of the Jedi for anybody who hasn't seen it, so I don't even really want to talk about it. But there's like the Dooku episodes where there's entire conversations happening and they never say what the conversation is about. You understand what the conversation is about because of the larger context and because of understanding the larger pieces of lore, but they never come out and spell it. That's great writing. That's what I want to see. What I don't want to see is like Sabine going into Ezra's tower and having her helmet in the foreground when she crouches down in the most like blatant way. Like, be a little bit more deft with how you frame some of these things, so it's just not screaming to the audience like the member berries kind of stuff. But so you have that training scene. Let's get back to that, where it could have been handled in a different way that was just more efficient with scenes, where you cut out one, have the training. And I've got a call coming in that I'm going to handle, and we are going to have to cut this in a moment. All right, where was I? So we were talking about the training scene. So right after the training scene, this is strong counter, and you can. This is what's mentioned. He's got the Sith bomber here. Pay attention to the reinforcements that we've been seeing. This is why I was saying at the top of the video, my opponent probably didn't update his presets and got caught up by it, because I bet his Leviathan wasn't very usable because of what teams had already been set on defense previously. Okay, so next scene. Hera talking to the Senate about Thrawn, and the scene is conveying that the Senate doesn't take the threat seriously. Perfectly fine, could have been done better. Like, you can imagine if Tony Gilroy wrote that, how much more effective it would be, because the writing was not very good. But the scene, more or less, is fine. The problem is the next scene, scene 3, is it's the same information. It is now Hera giving an info dump to Ahsoka and Sabine about what was already happening in the previous scene. You don't need both. You choose one. And neither scene was all that interesting or effective. And the bigger problem is you already had Ahsoka and Sabine on their way. They were already on their way to go after Thrawn. Now this is wrapping up. Let me pause this. We got to switch to a different screen. You can. This is the win. We'll finish this point. Yeah. So we won. My opponent can't clear. Great. We're just going to keep going with an Ahsoka rant, and then we will wrap up. Because another one of those rules for writing, for interesting or effective writing, is you want your characters to be active within the story, not passive. And the characters already being on their way to Thrawn and to that ring, is on its face, it seems like it's active. They're already doing something. But this is a passive moment because that information that they receive from Hera has no purpose other than to inform the characters of what's going on and to give a larger coloring to what is going on with the Senate. But that was already established in the previous scene. So in terms of what it means for Ahsoka and Hera, it's nothing other than letting them know, which we, the audience, we don't benefit really from that. It could have been done in a completely different way that is a little bit more effective, or could have led into making some active choices, where I give this as an example on the Discord, where imagine this instead, where they structure the show out differently, where you have the scene 1 with the training, with Hu Yang, all that's being established. You get to the helmet, where they put the helmet onto Sabine. That's where you cut to title, where the audience knows from larger context of Star Wars lore, with Luke, with all these other shows, what that helmet represents, what training is going to happen next. We don't really need to see it, but you can still show it, but you cut it there because that's a dramatic moment. Cut to title, then you cut to Hera talking to the Senate. I would film it better, have a little better writing, but the scene itself is fine with what it's trying to convey. But instead of having Hera and Sabine on the way, what you instead have is Hera contacting Sabine and Ahsoka, interrupting the training, because you then cut back to the training. You have some more of those scenes of dialogues, of connection between Ahsoka and Sabine. Get that interrupted by Hera, where Hera says, the fleet's not coming. They don't take Thrawn seriously. And in that moment, you have Ahsoka and Sabine say, we're going to do it anyway. Making an active choice, using that information to say, it doesn't matter if we don't have the help. This is too important. We need to go save Ezra. We need to go after Thrawn. Thrawn is too dangerous. And then go off onto the mission. That's a completely different way to structure basically all the same information. And it would have had a much larger impact. And that's what I mean here. Like, the writing is not up to it. The plot is fine. The scenes, the choices are fine. It's the execution that is poor. And that's what I don't like. Because the next thing you see is 15 minutes, half of that episode, where we've got 8 episodes, guys. And they're doing the same thing they've done in Book of Boba Fett and Mando Season 3, where they're wasting episodes for things that don't matter and for things that have little consequence, just for action filler. It's like that, what I compared it to was that pterodactyl episode of Mando, where basically the only thing that happens is you get Paz Vizsla saying, you saved my son, I'm with you. You don't need to have 15, 20 minutes of action to convey that. Because go back to some of your favorite movies. Like if you want to watch like Terminator or like some of the classic Indiana Jones movies, time out how long those action sequences are. They're not that long, because stretching them out, it doesn't make them better. Action is a tool, is a storytelling tool. When it's used best, when it's used appropriately. Action for action's sake is not interesting. If action for action's sake was interesting, the Transformers movies would not be a joke to most people. There's better ways to do these things. There's plenty of action movies, and they never get their hooks into people, and that is why. Because it doesn't matter. And if it doesn't matter to the audience, they're not gonna feel invested to watch it 2 times, 10 times, 100 times. Anyway, we're probably going to be ranting a lot about Ahsoka moving forward because I love that character. And I think Filoni understands and does a great job with that character. I mean, it's his character. But I had a lot of hopes for this series, and so far, it's not living up to it. Because, like Tales of the Jedi, that last season of Clone Wars, that's some of the best Star Wars there is. If you haven't watched it, you're seriously cheating yourself. Like, I get there's some episodes and stuff that it makes it hard to get into. One, Clone Wars, you don't need to watch it in order, and you can just watch the episodes that matter and skip everything else. I put a list, there's plenty of lists out there of just the storylines that matter, watch those. Do that. Have a great time, because that last arc in Clone Wars, I think it's my favorite Star Wars story. It's really, really good. Really, really good. But we gotta wrap it up. 5 minutes talking about that episode. Well, more than that if we total up, but this take. Yeah. We will be back. We'll try and go 3-0 this week, because this is a favorable bracket for me. A lot of smaller accounts, a lot of younger accounts, a lot of situations where I've got some advantages. One opponent maybe 2 opponents who are at that typical level that we usually see in brackets like these. But thank you for watching. Be excellent to each other, everyone. This is Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes.